There's a chap on Twitter called Malcolm Nance. He's got nearly 1 million followers, and he's losing his mind because yesterday was the Virginia vote to see who the new government would be. He says, "I'm begging you, Virginia, tell out everyone you know today. If you lose this race, democracy will lose. Go vote. Make sure everyone who voted last year votes."
See, democracy will lose if you vote for a serial liar.
But what I love about this is the Democrat framework. And if we get to the next one, you can see, again, this sort of just, it's something that's just in the water of the Democratic it's like culture. Maybe a candidate isn't exciting enough. Maybe they're too white. Maybe they are not white enough, not progressive enough, not moderate enough. I don't effing care. If you don't show up to vote, we will lose our democracy. Because in the minds of these people, if someone votes against you, that's the end of democracy. We've got a live reaction from MSNBC when the results started coming in. You can see that picture.
Oh, that's a great selfie, isn't it?
It just demonstrates the raw partisanship of American media at this point. We also have a live reaction from the White House. I love this meme so much. This is what they get for using this stupid influencer. Jen, MSNBC, is saying we lost Virginia. I love that so much.
Yeah.
So anyway, so the vote's in, and it turns out that Republican candidate Glenn Youngkin won the Virginia governor's race. Now I'm going to use Washington Examiner's summary of this because, of course, we're not Americans, so we're not going to have all the details, so we're going to use this. So he flipped the Virginia governorship to Republican control, pulling off the win by embracing hot-button education and cultural issues and signaling trouble for Democrats nationwide in 2022. Now that's fantastic because it shows that the electorate in certain counties are very concerned about the cultural issues that the Democrats are forcing onto the table. Loudoun County, you may recall, is in there, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So he led what appears to be a Republican sweep, with Winsome Sears winning the lieutenant governor's office, Jason Miyares leading the incumbent Democrat attorney general Mark Herring, blah, blah, blah. And so basically the Republicans have essentially taken over Virginia, which is good news for people who don't want to see their countries destroyed by radical leftism. They say that he defeated a strategy by his Democratic opponent, former Governor Terry McAuliffe, or however you pronounce it, to paint him as an extremist and tie him to Donald Trump, despite Youngkin having a drastically different temperament and political approach to the former president. Youngkin has never had a political office before. He was a businessman before. So I can see why they would try and tie him to Trump. But Youngkin, as they say, he's not Trump. He's a very salient man who isn't a giant orange ego. And I say this as a Trump supporter. And so that didn't work. And you may recall, of course, them bringing out the black white supremacists with their tiki torches to appear outside of his tour bus, his campaigning bus. Yes. Very persuasive. Obviously not black ops. So Youngkin is a Virginia native, a former CEO of the Carlyle Group, private equity firm, which he left so he could run for office. Never run for office before. His core campaign pledges, including eliminating Virginia's 2.5% grocery tax, so making food cheaper, cutting regulations with the aim of spurring job growth, always a good idea, and doubling the standard deduction for income tax. So basically people aren't going to have to pay as much tax. So who could argue?
Doesn't sound bad to me.
No. Who could argue with that? Well, I suppose the people who could argue with that, the people who rely on those voters who live on handouts, right?
Yes.
That's so not the productive members of society, but those people
and
who are...
those who have a fetish for centralising authority.
There is also those people. And so this, of course, comes on the heels of the Loudoun County cover-up, which we covered in a premium video because YouTube gave Steven Crowder a strike when he talked about it. So we weren't able to take the risk of talking about it on YouTube. So if you'd like to know more about what happened there, feel free to go to lotus.com and check that out. But anyway, so it moves. This all comes on the heels of political advocacy for critical race theory in the schools, because this is something that's happening. And Politico had some thoughts on this. They say it's increasingly become a major focus of the Republican establishment, which has sought to capitalize on the angst, even as some office holders have failed to define what critical race theory is and the threat it poses. I love the maneuver. Well, I mean, you haven't defined critical race theory to my satisfaction. Oh, you don't know whether it's bad or anything. There's nothing here. There's nothing important about critical race theory that's going through the schools. They say critical race theory, for example, does not imply white students should feel guilty about past civil rights issues and is not taught in many of the schools where lawmakers seeking to ban it. Both lies. Just both outright lies. I I have read the Critical Race Theory Bible, the big university textbook that you were given, and that's not true.
Yeah, it is quite literally perpetuating a culture of guilt amongst white Americans.
And it is necessarily the case because of the systemic nature of critical race theory. If everything is tied to systems and nothing is distinguished from anything else, you are not distinguished from your ancestors, and therefore you inherit the guilt that they incurred from the small percentage of the white people in Virginia who owned slaves. So it is necessarily that it incurs guilt to white people who live now, who of course do not own slaves. And so anyway, this total cover it's not true. But anyway, they say, their efforts to elevate the issue worked. Becky Pringle, the president of the National Education Association, said, "We have made many mistakes in this country, but our kids deserve to learn all of that truth." Again, you can see the systemic nature of this. They can't at any point divorce themselves from what has happened by previous generations 150 years ago that they aren't involved with. They didn't have a responsibility over. And journalist and author Ta-Nehisi Coates and Hollywood actress and LGBT activist Lena Waithe, along with dozens of academics and writers, are also backing efforts to support teaching students about systemic racism. Again, the systemic nature of it. You can't get away from the fact that this will bring about white guilt. And so for 25% of Virginia voters, critical race theory was the top concern, whereas 72% called it important. So even if you're more concerned about your taxes or, kitchen table issues, as they call them, 3/4 nearly are importantly, consider it an important issue that it's happening. So what is critical race theory? What's it for? Well, I did a video on this on the second channel, which you can find linked in the description or pinned in the comments to this, about how critical race theory is essentially a form of Gramscian war of position, as in they've been working for about 30 years with the intent on basically overthrowing Western liberal democracies.
Yeah.
That's not an exaggeration. That is their plan, and they're explicit about it. And I go through the original sources, Kimberly Crenshaw's explicit declarations of that in that video. But if you want to know more about critical race theory in detail, again, we're covering a lot of this on lotuses.com because this is all very important and it is coming to a political head. If we go to the next one, John, Callum and I have begun a detailed deep dive into the origin and purpose, and I'll be going through in the next one the theories that underpin critical race theory, because they've got their own worldview and series of assertions about how the world works. This is important stuff, and if you do want more information, you can go there. We also are going to move into whether the sorry, don't worry about that. I was going to say something else. Anyway, so they're concerned about this because they think that this is going to make the political environment very pro-Republican. And it might, because the Republicans have actually done a very good job of pinning intersectionality on critical race theory. And there's a good reason for that, because as I point out in the previous video, in fact, Kimberly Crenshaw, one of the lead critical race theorists and someone who has 3 essays, I think it is, in the critical race theory key writings that form the movement Bible. She is also the progenitor of the term intersectionality in various essays that she wrote in 1988, 1989, and 1991. So this is all deeply connected. You can't separate intersectionality from critical race theory, and the Republicans have done a very good job of nailing these things together. I think it's in particular a chap called Christopher Rufo who's done this. Top marks, go follow him on Twitter. He's doing excellent work.
Our own Conservative Party should do the same.
There's no reason they shouldn't do the same. And you're absolutely right. So anyway, one of the major disappointments for the Democrats, this is where we start getting to the cope, is that they found, after looking at the votes, it was white women who decided to go Republican for this one. You can go to the next one, John. So as this verified checkmark here points out, in 2020 in Virginia, white women were literally half and half on Biden and Trump. Whereas in 2021, 57% went for Youngkin, which is the Republican, whereas 43% went for McAuliffe, which is the Democrat. Which is a 15-point swing to the GOP with this group. And I think I can't stress this enough. Don't go after their kids. Don't try to indoctrinate their children into racism, and maybe they wouldn't vote Republican quite so heavily.
Right.
We even get a better breakdown of this, and I find this even more amusing. So if we can go scroll down a bit. Sorry, if you scroll down on this tweet. There we go. So white women college graduates, 58% Biden, 41% Trump. in 2020, whereas in 2021, 62% went for McAuliffe and 38% Youngkin. So what university-educated white women, even more so, voted for critical race theory, whereas non-college educated white women, again, about 56% Trump, 44% Biden in 2020, 75% Youngkin, 25%
Now,
McAuliffe.
why could that be?
It's interesting, isn't it? So family-focused women don't want racist indoctrination, whereas women who have been indoctrinated into the critical race theory cult want others to join their cult. That's what that is. So anyway, let's get into the cope, because this is the good bit. All right, so go for the first one. Youngkin got the Trump base and then convinced normal people he wasn't Trumpy by not being Trumpy. He was careful not to have Trump come and say crazy stuff, which is a very smart move. He got Trumpism to scale by keeping it at arm's length. Ultimately, he's a Trumpist, but he made the people in Virginia think he wasn't as nuts.
Yes, he adopted a workable political strategy, whereas you didn't.
A workable, patriotic political strategy
Yes.
that wasn't inherently racist. I mean, what a fantastic advertisement from the verified check marks.
She might have just have said, well done, you won.
Yeah, exactly. Vote Youngkin. Van Jones came out and called Glenn Youngkin the Delta variant of Trumpkin. Same disease, but it spreads a lot faster and can get a lot more places. Brilliant. That's fantastic. Like patriotic pro-Americanism, but more effectively delivered than how Trump did it. God, let's hope so. Next one is how Youngkin won with many people who didn't like Trump. That's interesting, isn't it? They were trying to, like, McAuliffe's entire strategy was to try and tie Youngkin to Trump and then smear him as a white supremacist. They at some point they had some people with Confederate flags as well. It's like, that's not what's happening. But it turns out that 1 in 5 voters who disapproved of Trump still voted for Youngkin. So it's like, yes, so they must have been concerned about their children being indoctrinated too. The next one was great, right? So he made just a statement. He was just like, look, we're going to embrace parents. We're not going to ignore them. We're going to press forward with a curriculum that puts listening to parents' input. Compare that to the Biden administration's, well, you're not the primary stakeholder in your children's education. Like, if you've got kids in school, who are you voting for?
Yeah. I mean, something like that would wind up caring parents, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and you've got these two options. One, you're not the primary stakeholder, or we're going to listen to parents and, take your input on board. I mean, he just sounds very sensible. He just sounds really sensible.
Yeah.
And of course, they're concerned that he's going to follow through with his number one campaign promise to sign an executive order to ban critical race theory in Virginia schools.
Yay.
Perfect.
Keep up the good work.
Yeah, I wonder how many voters will be surprised when it changes absolutely nothing, since it isn't being taught in a single school. I mean, it literally is, and you're lying, Ron, with 21,000 likes. Twitter being an absolute engine of misinformation here. We can give you an example from the New York Post. The Department of Education, Virginia's Department of Education's website features a presentation urging teachers to embrace critical race theory. Under the Northern Administration, Superintendent of Public Instruction James Lane sent a memo to Virginia public schools endorsing something called the Foundations of Critical Race Theory in Education, calling it an important analytic tool and further spur developments in education. I mean, what more do we need? I suppose that what they'll do is say, but they're not teaching critical race theory to the children. What they're doing is endorsing the methodological framework that promotes the consequences of critical race theory to the children. It's like, yes, and that's a distinction that didn't need to be made and is what the parents mean when they say you're teaching critical race theory. If you get it would literally be like a bunch of Nazi teachers saying, well, we're not teaching Nazism to the children. It's like, yeah, but you are teaching whatever it is you're teaching through a Nazi lens. And I use the term Nazi because there's literally no real moral difference between critical race theory and Nazis.
There isn't.
It's exactly the same thing.
Isn't.
It's just done from different perspectives, basically. This Christopher Rufo, if you can, you've got the tweet there. In fact, can you bring up the circled bit on that tweet, John, just so you can see it for yourselves, just so you can show that we're not making this up or anything. But that image there, you can see it there. Foundations of Critical Race Theory just takes this off their website. Right now on its website, the Virginia Department of Education recommends critical race theory in education as a best practice and derives its definitions of racism, white supremacy, and education equity explicitly from critical race theory. There we go. Anyway, so they don't know what to do now. They've become aware. They're like, look, if Democrats are smart, they'll come up with a way to expose this education panic for what it is, because otherwise buckle up. It's like, what are you going to do? Explain critical race theory to people and make yourselves look even more racist than you are? I mean, you can't win on this issue. It's amazing. There's nothing for you to win because critical race theory literally says white people bad.
Yeah.
Like that's all this is. And so we get to the denial because otherwise, I mean, you can't win on the issue of critical race theory. You've got to deny that it even exists.
The imaginary critical race theory crisis, really?
Yes, imaginary. And that was more important than preventable deaths of 400,000 Americans, as if the Virginia governor was capable of doing that. And the January 6th attack, as if the Virginia governor had anything to do with that. And the GOP war on democracy. Yes, when they win, it's the end of democracy. Moving on, it's a fake boogeyman. Republicans won by creating a fake boogeyman and telling suburban voters they will defeat it. Well, if they ban it, they will have defeated it, and it's not really fake if there is something there to ban. Dems didn't come out with a counter message. Yeah, because your only counter message would be actually critical race theory good, which is not going to work.
Combined with serial lying about coronavirus.
Of course, and every other subject under the sun. Hats off to the depraved cynicism and villainy and race baiting. What? Accusing the Republicans of race baiting. Amazing. That's amazing. I suppose the Republicans falsified tiki torches outside of McAuliffe's campaign bus, did they?
Yes,
anyway,
exactly.
Moving on, this is just another manifestation of whiteness. What were we saying about race baiting again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's just...
No, whiteness remains undefeated. Let's wait and see who those white suburban voters went for tonight. Any guesses?
Brilliant.
And he replies to his own tweet going, for those GOP trying to dunk on this tweet, let me repeat, whiteness wins again. They won't get it. But I get it. Because what they mean when they say the word whiteness is Americanness. That's what they're saying. They think the United States of America is a white project. And so if you were an American with American values and believe in America, regardless of your race, you are white. That's what they think.
Yes.
That's how you get black white supremacists.
Yes, and they quite literally believe that the entire Enlightenment in the United States is rooted on white supremacy, and that is quite literally what they're trying to indoctrinate the children with.
Yes, and so it's an attempt to overturn the entire Enlightenment project that is the American Revolution.
Yes.
And of course, just to be clear, there's nothing about the American Revolution that necessitates anyone being white.
Of course.
It requires you to have a racial context in any way. And you can see this by the number of non-white people who are trying to get into the United States. Because when they see it laid out, oh, you're going to have freedom, private property protections, constitutional rights. Yeah, I think that sounds good. And I don't care if that's white, because it's not white. It's for everyone. Anyway, so along with Youngkin, this is Virginia's new lieutenant governor. We can just get that picture up. I love it. I love everything about it. There's a black woman with an AR-15 who votes Republican, who is a Republican. What are you going to do now? Oh, she's an Uncle Tom or an Aunt Jemima, whatever it is. Yeah, that's all you've got, isn't it? So I guess this is the new guardian of white supremacy. Keeps winning. I watched an interview, a speech that she gave on her acceptance speech. We can get the next one. She seems very sensible. She starts saying USA, and the crowds start chanting USA with her. I mean, maybe someone should tell her that she's not the right race to be an American, because that's what the critical race theorists are saying.
What? Yeah.
She calls herself living proof that integration worked and that black people are free. How's she wrong?
Yeah.
Like, how she's just become the lieutenant governor of Virginia. Oh, but black people aren't free. But
look what she's achieved.
Exactly. She says, and this is her platform, our children are going to get a good education because education lifted my father out of poverty and lifted me out of poverty and will create generational wealth. Preach. So anyway, in opposition to this Republican black lady winning, the Democrats were supporting previously Ralph Northam, who was the previous governor of Virginia. As one of our commenters, in fact, informed us, Virginia has 1 term limits, so they had to go for someone else. Which one do you think Northam is? Do you think he's in the KKK hood or doing blackface?
I wouldn't want to anticipate.
Take a guess.
The one on the right?
Yeah, he's the KKK hood guy.
Oh, he's not.
He is. Democrat politician cosplaying as a KKK member.
Unbelievable.
I love it. And then Republican black woman, they're all like, no, not a Republican black woman with a gun.
Are they trying to be caricatures of themselves?
Yes, it's literally, it looks like a late night comedy sketch.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? It honestly does. But Red Steve's killing it as usual, by the way. Stephen Miller's great. Go follow him on Twitter if you use that blasted hell platform. Anyway, a Republican woman also won the mayoralty of a New York city called Glen Cove, which is nice. But anyway, I just thought I'd add that in just to show that, Democrats don't have a monopoly on blacks or women. why anyone would think they did. But anyway, moving on. What a train wreck. We need to take a hard look at how we counter the insidious, racist fear-mongering and messaging. Ignoring it isn't working.
What you're doing then?
Yeah, I think it's coming from within inside the house, Fred. Virginia is, of course, the most racist state. Youngkin won because he convinced a lot of Virginians that their kids should never ever learn that their state was the last state in the Union to desegregate.
Bore off.
Yeah, exactly. It would be one thing if he won with some random policy issue, but he ran on straight up racism. What a disgrace.
The party against segregation is not yours, Walter.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I don't know what to tell you, Walter. It was literally the Republicans who were against segregation and slavery and, Jim Crow and all of the other bad things that the Democrats did in the past, like wearing KKK hoods. Again, another product of the Democrats. Why do I have to keep saying this? Anyway, so moving on, Amanda Marcotte, one of the famous lunatics from back in the day, had thoughts. If you can scroll a bit, you can see a thread. But basically she says, I see that the browbeating until morale improves is still the favorite political theory on Twitter. Good luck with that. I tend to think it's hard to get people to vote when your argument is, sure, nothing is getting fixed, but also, yeah. Good point. But then she moves on to say, two things can be true. Youngkin voters are racist and Democrats stayed at home. It's like, that's browbeating, you dunce. You are literally browbeating the people in Virginia who voted for Youngkin as racists because they're bad. They should have voted for you or they're bad people. That's your entire argument. Anyway, moving on. White people are racist. Says MSNBC. Youngkin's victory proves that white ignorance is a powerful weapon. It's all those stupid white women who didn't vote for the Democrat because they hadn't been brainwashed in university. Yeah.
Who don't know what's good for their children.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, they don't even own their children, do they? Hey, moving on. MSNBC's Joy Reid is freaking out about this. Love it. The gubernatorial campaign is coded racial hysteria into its critical race theory hype. Or we could just top it all off by just saying, well, look, and this is where the mask comes fully off. This is what they really mean. America simply loves white supremacy.
That's always going to be the conclusion when they lose an election.
Yep. All of America is just wearing KKK hoods, say the Democrats. Congratulations, Glenn Youngkin. Fantastic. Love the meltdown. Looking forward to more meltdowns in the future.
Yes, and I sincerely hope that our own party takes note of this political strategy.
They could win bigly if they want.
Yeah, by an even bigger landslide than they did before.
Thanks for watching this clip from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters. We broadcast live on lotuseaters.com at 1 p.m. UK time every weekday. And we also have loads more content that we don't put on YouTube, such as the memes and video comments from our community. Every week, we also have new episodes of our regular series, Contemplations and Epochs. In Contemplations, Josh explores interesting and diverse topics, such as the science behind the need for fathers in the home, or why people believe in ghosts and the paranormal. In Epochs, Bo and I go on, often at length, about various events and periods in history that are particularly fascinating. We've just finished a 5-part mini-series on the 100 Years' War, which I particularly enjoyed right up until the end of it when, spoiler alert, the French won. Alongside our excellent team of in-house writers, we also commission articles from outside contributors, and silver and gold tier subscribers have access to an audio recording of each premium article, so you don't have to read it yourself. We interview various contemporary thinkers and entertainers, as well as host the recordings of our live events. We also have a series of premium video content on the site, which we think is particularly worthwhile, or we simply can't put on YouTube because their editorial policies prohibit reasonable discussion on the subject. Personally, I think the deep dives we've been doing into critical theory and critical race theory are most important, as we reveal the origins of intersectionality and the plan that the radical left has for our societies. We are funded almost exclusively by our subscribers, so if you'd like to join us in the work we're doing, head over to lotuseaters.com and we'll see you there.